Good afternoon. We are here today because we have been created with dreams material by Shakespeare. Hay Festival was built with talent, more talent, and synergies brought forward by the 4 organizations that back the event. I'd like to thank all the sponsors, and I would like to invite Julie Finch, the CEO of the festival, and Florence Van Holsbeck. Did I pronounce that properly?
Estimado John,
Dear John, dear President, dear directors of the festival, dear friends, it is a pleasure for me to represent the region of Wallonia, the Wallonia-Brussels International Association, and the Agency for the Foreign Exports in the framework of our participation of the Hay Festival of Segovia. In this edition of the festival, we will be paying tribute to Georges Simenon, a great Belgian writer from the 20th century. The adventures of the famous Commissaire Maigret are one of his most famous works. As you probably know, he is the most read and most translated Belgian writer, with more than 3,500 translations into 47 languages. He is also the most read author in French after Jules Verne and Alexandre Dumas. If you want to discover his works and to discover his extraordinary career, you will be able to do this during the weekend, visiting our kiosk in Wallonia in the center of Segovia. And you will also be able to participate in several activities. We invite you to come at 7:30 soon this weekend to be able to attend a workshop on Georges Simenon. On Saturday the 17th until Sunday, the guests of the festival will be able to participate at a competition surrounding Georges Simenon. The goal is to get this author to be even more well known. We also have an award, special award, a trip to Belgium for 2 people if you want to participate in this. Also on Sunday, we will be sharing the winner of this award. We also offer on Sunday the possibility of watching the recent film with Gérard Depardieu. Hopefully the activities that we have organized in this framework will allow you to get to know a little bit better Georges Simenon and a little more about our country. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Apologies, I can't speak Spanish yet. As the new Chief Executive of Hay Festival, that's the first resolution I made to myself, that I must learn to speak Spanish. So, welcome to you all, and thank you for the warm welcome that I've had so far on my visit to Madrid. This is the first time that I've been here, and I'm very much looking forward to going to Segovia tomorrow. I have one of the best jobs in the world. We bring people together. Hay Festivals operates across the world, in Latin America, in the USA, in Europe, and a wide range of other places. And in particular, this year in October, we will be live streaming from the Live Book Festival in Ukraine, and something I know my colleagues are incredibly proud of, that we can stand in solidarity with our colleagues who are interested in literature in Ukraine. What's so exciting about Hay Festival is how the festival brings people together. It convenes writers, readers, audiences, and one of my favourite parts of the role is to see children and young people engaging in writing, in reading, in sharing, in discussing. And that's really how the magic happens. It's bringing people like you together to hear about so many different topics and subject matter that are affecting the world today, your lives, but also things that bring you great joy. As ever, we are deeply indebted to all of our sponsors and our funders, without whom none of this could happen. So thank you once again for welcoming me to Madrid. Thank you.
I forgot to say that I'm Michel Kremashki, the director of Hay Festival here in Spain. Apologies for that. I would like to give the floor now to the chair of this debate, Miquel Molina. He is a writer, a journalist. He is the deputy director of La Vanguardia, and he has written 3 novels. He also has a column in the La Vanguardia newspaper devoted to culture and cities. Fascinating topic. So I'll give you the floor, Miquel. Thank you to everyone.
Gracias por acompañarnos.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for being with us. Thanks to Fundación Telefónica for welcoming us. It's a great pleasure to be here to open the Hay Festival week that will start in Thursday in Segovia Festival that started this year in Barcelona, in All Jew in Barcelona, in an event that we have about culture and cities last week. We had a great audience there, by the way. It's a great privilege that these places have hold events for literature, especially when we are speaking about celebrating books that do not want to change the world, but just to make us enjoy with an exceptional writer's work.
Asked me to participate in this debate. I had to go back to Simenon, where I had left him some decades ago. I remember my grandfather's library was full of Simenon's books, most of them with Maigret as a protagonist. These books were published by the publishing house Albor, which was based in Barcelona. It's one of these books. And at that time, Simenon was extremely popular in Spain. We will talk later about popularity in Spain of Simenon. Luckily for all of us, this operation of going back to Simenon was very easy for me because, there are these big publishing houses who are working to reissue, to recover Simenon's works. André Gide said that what makes Simenon a great author is that he is Simenon in every book, meaning that every one of these books are at a very high level. My feeling after renewing my interest in Simenon is that when you read a novel by him, you always think that this novel is very much alive. We have here with us. I wanted to say also that Simenon is going to be very alive now in the big screen, because in a couple of days the main TV and content platforms in Spain are going to broadcast the film Maigret, directed by Patrice Lecomte and starring Gérard Depardieu. We are going to have a premiere also these days in the Hay Festival in Segovia. We have here with us the producer of this film, John Simenon, who is, as you know, Simenon's son. He's a film producer and the director of the literary estate of Georges Simenon. This estate is in charge of managing all rights to the works of Simenon, who are more than 400 titles published on his own name. And there are also a lot of reasons to why Caroline Michel is joining us today on this stage, because one of them is she is the chair of the Hay Festivals, but she's also a literary agent working with John in managing the Georges Simenon rights. She's also vice president of the London Library and the British Film Institute. I would like to start with a question for John Simenon. 7 years ago, a colleague of my newspaper, in an interview, asked you if you had read all the books your father wrote. And your answer was, fortunately not, so I have a lot of fun ahead of me. So, 7 years later, have you made much progress in reading your father's books? Is there still a lot of fun left for you in the future?
I expect to have many years to go, so I want to keep a lot of fun for me for these many years. So I'm reading the books. Of course, I've made some progress, but I still have many books to read, and I look forward to that. I would just like to take an opportunity first for thanking everybody to be here, and also I'm not the producer of the Maigret film, but just one of the many co-producers, and there are many other people who've worked on that project, and they should be given their due credit.
So I have a question for Caroline. Which countries are most interested in publishing Simenon today? And what are the ones that are likely enough to not have discovered him yet and having the opportunity to know him?
Well, I think when I first started working with John nearly 10 years ago, we were looking at various statistics, and I think Simenon is what most read after the Bible and Shakespeare. So, his work is universally acknowledged as across the world, one of the best writers that you could read. So, I think, John, there's 47, 48 territories published Simenon, and we are incredibly ambitious to bring Simenon to the rest of the world. Over the years, countries have come and gone with Simenon. There are trends in writing, but one of the things about Simenon is his enduring appeal. And everybody finds something about one of the books, whether it's the Maigret or whether it's the Roman d'Or, that they just affects and changes their life, that draws them into the rest of the work. And it's been such a pleasure to work with John over the last few years and see, when we started with the English language, there were 10 years ago, we worked with Penguin, and there were 4 or 5 books in print, and 4 years later there's over 1 million sold, which just shows that the minute people begin to read Simenon, whether it's the Maigret or the Roman d'Or, you cannot stop. And for those of you that haven't had the pleasure, I just can't wait for you to start reading them.
A very interesting and very curious thing about Simenon is that he somehow combined being a very popular and top-selling author with the fact that he was almost always working with very exquisite and literary publishers. It started with Gallimard in the beginning in France, and then we had Calasso with Adelphi in Italy, and then in Spain, Jaume Vallcorba, Acantilado, Quaderns Crema, and later Anagrama, and among other publishers. What's your opinion on this fact, being loved by literary publishers, but at the same time never stop producing bestsellers? It's a question for both of us.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure.
This combination of being working with very exquisite and literary publishers and being very popular.
It's one of the things that John has carried on. I mean, John will talk to you about the relationship that Georges Simenon had with his publishers. He had incredibly close relationships with his publishers. And the thing that just from my point, John will talk about how, because John has incredibly close relationships with the publishers of Georges Simenon's work, and I think that makes a huge difference to have that connection. But the other thing that we just love is that after 40 years in publishing, people say, is it a literary book or is it a commercial book? I mean, the extraordinary thing that people realize about a writer like Simenon, he may be published by the greatest literary and prestigious houses in the world, but he's adored by the public. He is a literary commercial writer. And I think there are so few, John, aren't there?
There are few. I would like to say that whether it is literary or commercial, they're just good books. And that's the way he wanted them to be. And to go back to your answer and your question, I don't think my father was really thinking of his publishers as having to be literary or commercial or being classified. What he wanted is, as you said, Caroline, it started with a relationship. It started with meeting between two people. One person who was doing his best to produce the best possible books he could make, and a publisher who would be sensitive to that and would want to bring it to the world. And you mentioned the names. There are many others. Mondadori, you mentioned Canamera also, and this is what we're still trying to do. Some of these people are in smaller literary companies. Calasso, you mentioned, Acantilado. But some other people who really are sensitive to Simenon's little music are in bigger companies, more commercial companies. And some companies have both, like Penguin Classics and Stefan, who heads Penguin Classics. But he's an imprint within a much bigger, much huge, probably the biggest today, no?
In Europe,
commercial and literary house. So it really has to be a personal relationship. And that's what I try to continue.
You are keeping this way of relating to...
Because that's the way it started, and because I guess it started that way, because that's the way it works with my father's work.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about Simenon and his works in Spain, because we know there is a gap between this one and these ones. Here he was extremely popular. What are your expectations now that all this is going on?
Certainly, the idea is to try to do in Spain, to build the same kind of recognition and readership as we managed through a terrific, in fact that is Caroline who brought back Penguin to Simenon, or Simenon to Penguin, whichever way you want to look at it. So the idea here is in a very different environment with different books, with a different mix, but to revive the awareness and the attractivity of Simenon's works. And in fact, there's one thing missing on this. It's the dust jacket.
The cover, the jacket.
And one thing that I should also say is that all throughout his life, my father's jackets were absolutely stunning and very, very special. And the dust jackets of this collection are still remembered as having made a difference in the publishing world in Spain. And these are just so good as far as we're concerned that well, Jane is not around yet, but she knows that...
No, she's here.
Oh, she's here? Oh, hello, Jane, sorry. Okay, but she knows that we have a discussion to have how to use these jackets in other countries, in other countries of the world.
And what about South America? It's an opportunity to go there and... to take Simenon there?
That's our dream, because with the Hay Festival being all over Latin America, so I go to Mexico with Hay and to Cartagena and to Peru, and I meet other publishers there, local publishers and readers, and because I've been passionate about Simenon most of my life, and then when I met John, I just became even more enthused about the possibilities. And I meet publishers there who say, when are we going to have Simenon in Mexico? When are we going to have Simenon in Peru? So we're very ambitious, aren't we, John?
Always.
Yeah.
There is an interesting story. I would like to know your opinion. There the publisher's name was Francesc Cañameras, and he was a company man from Barcelona who lived in Paris at that time when he had this deal with your father to publish his novels. I did a little research on this name, and I found a scholar's research saying that Cañameras was actually a real name with a real person behind, but also the nickname or the cover for about 20 other translators that signed the translation as Cañameras. And this was a way Cañameras invented just to help some intellectuals from the Spanish Republican exile in Paris in times of Franco's dictatorship. And so they can earn some money. So we can say somehow that your father, knowing it or without being aware of it, was kind of funding the Spanish Republican exile in Paris. Did you know about this story? What do you think your father knew about it?
Well, I'm definitely going to have to dig into my archives to find more about this, and I'm going to do some more research, because totally separately from your own inquiry, I found out very recently from somebody who published a history of the Socialist Party that he claims that my father subsidized the Socialist Party in a different way by accepting to receive lower royalties than normal, and that part of his royalties would go straight to the Socialist Party. I'm still looking for that book. I'm still looking for that information, so I cannot vouch for it. But if it is true, because my father did know, of course, Cañamera, as I just said, his relationships were very personal. At least on that level, he would definitely have decided to do it on purpose, and it would be, as far as I'm concerned, it would be totally in character, without any doubt. But before I can confirm, I have to go and check.
Because is it true he had this rule of having only one publisher and one translator per country?
Not one translator, one publisher.
One publisher.
Yes, if possible, of course, at any one time. Yeah. Because when you have such a large output, you need to make that output available to the public in a consistent, coherent way. So if different publishers take a different strategy, it's going to be dissonant. It is not going to work very well. The good thing about this collection, it was all one single graphic designer, and the books were recognizable immediately. Mm-hmm. Same thing here. It's the same idea, and obviously the very successful Maigret revival in the English world. These are all pictures from the same photographer. So there's unity, there's coherence, there's... I don't like to use that word because obviously it sounds very commercial, but it means what it means. A name like Simenon, in a way, is a brand, not in the commercial way, but in the DNA type of meaning of the world. And you need to be able to express that through not only covers, but a coherent publishing plan.
Let's go to the movies. As a co-producer of this long-awaited film by Patrice Lecomte, Maigret, starring Gerard Depardieu, could you tell us how it was working in this project, bringing those old stories to today's audiences?
Okay, it was extremely smooth. It was a very, it's not always that way, but on that particular film it was very smooth. Patrice Lecomte had already adapted another title from my father, Monsieur Hir, a great movie, about 30 years old. I knew him a little, and we met. We spent about 2 hours where he explained to me what he wanted to do, what he wanted to express. And he asked me how I felt about that. and essentially that's what you're going to see. He wanted Maigret to be at the end of his career, to be vulnerable. He wanted to show the cracks of this man who, for many, is just unassailable, if you want. He wanted to show them with doubts, with difficulties through life. So in a way, it's like a testimony. It's like a testament. I don't know how you say testament in English. It's not a will, but something like that. And then he sent me all the various versions of the script, and because in my situation I not only have to read the original book several times over, but the script as well. That is the reason I progress so slowly in reading new books, by the way, to answer your first question. So it is however, I must say I take great pleasure in doing that. And then the filming took place during COVID, so that was a bit difficult. Everybody had to keep a mask until just the take, so everybody was frantically taking their mask off and putting it back on before and after the take. During lunchtime, we had to sit far away, so it was difficult to have a discussion with Gérard Depardieu. I was sitting in front of him. We were both sitting, but we had a plexiglass wall between us, and we were trying to have some kind of personal rapport. It was not very easy. But Depardieu is a wonderful person. I don't subscribe to his political ideas, for sure, but as a person and as an actor, I mean, he's probably one of the top 5 actors of the world of the last 50 years. I put him on par with De Niro, with Paul Newman, and great I've got the name on the tip of Oliver.
Laurence Olivier.
Laurence Olivier. Yeah. Right. So it was a wonderful experience. Who said you had the best job in the world? Okay, I think I'm just slightly above.
Have you seen the film?
I loved it. Absolutely loved it. There was a screening in London, and it's as John says, it's incredibly moving because it's a man who is coming to terms with his own fallibilities, I think. And one of the things about Simenon's writings is he gets to the core of humanity and empathy with other people. And here is Maigret being unbelievably vulnerable in a very tough and difficult situation. And it's mesmerizing.
I'd just like to add that I will tell you that this is the adaptation of one particular book called Maigret et la jeune morte. In English, it's Maigret and the dead girl, if I remember correctly. Yeah. But I wanted the film to be called Maigret because it goes far beyond just that story. As far as I'm concerned, it's all about Maigret more than about the story itself.
We have Jean Gabin, Jean Richard, Charles Lawton, Rupert Davis, Rowan Atkinson, now Gérard Depardieu. These are only a few of the many actors that have played the role of Detective Maigret. Who of them is the one you prefer? And I've read your father's personal favorite was an Italian actor named Gino Cervi. Is that true?
Well, he had a great relationship with Gino Cervi because Gino Cervi would come every year to a town not far away from where my father lived to get like a how do you call it, a health farm, and so they would meet on a regular basis. So he had great admiration for him, but certainly Gino Cervi was not the only one, and my father, if asked, would always be very positive about the various Maigrets. There's only one that he felt uncomfortable with publicly, and that was Jean Richard. Otherwise, he left it to Maigret in Maigret's memoirs to speak for him in terms of the ones that he adhered to and the others. So he never publicly said anything negative. but you know, he really liked Rupert Davis very much, the very first English Maigret. Funny enough, there's been Maigret all over the world. There's even a Spanish Maigret who speaks Spanish with a Madame Maigret in kimono, which is quite unusual. But there's no Spanish Maigret as far as I'm concerned.
What's your personal favorite? Gerard Depardieu?
It's difficult to tell. I would say I have a few. Gérard Depardieu is one of the top three, but the very first one, Pierre Renoir, I have a very great admiration for him. I would say also that Bruno Kremer was terrific. There's probably I'm missing a few, but there were 35, so I don't have them all in memory.
And what about Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean?
Well, I think he did a very, very decent job. It was not very easy to work with somebody who apparently was so far away from what Maigret stands for. He was, it was difficult to overcome the idea that everybody thought, okay, Maigret will be played by Mr. Bean, which is definitely not the case, because Ron Atkinson is a very different person. He's very different from Mr. Bean. And he was the only actor that ITV would accept. So it was a question. It's either Rowan Atkinson and we work with him, or we don't have Maigret. So it was, I went to meet him. I spent about an hour with him, and he was very reflective. Ron Atkinson is a very thoughtful person, extremely. In fact, as a person, he's not very far from what I see being Maigret. So, at the end, I think it worked out. You are better placed than I am to say, but he was very well received in both the UK and France. In fact, the French reacted very positively to him. And the only reason we didn't continue is that he fell in love. And because of the shooting was taking place in Budapest, and he had to stay there 5 days a week and leave very late on Friday and come back extremely early on Monday morning for the shoot. He wanted to spend more time with his wife than with Maigret, and I can understand that. He changed his mind later on, but by then ITV had passed on to some other projects, so we cannot continue. But we're working on a new project in English. There's not much to say at this time, but it will be, we hope to be shooting sometime late spring next year.
Okay.
And if you ask me the question, who will be playing Maigret? There's a 40 picture list that we received a week ago, and I'm still going through and trying to find out which one would be best. It's a long process.
Is there a casting going on?
It's not exactly a casting. It's really what we call a very pre-casting, just to get some ideas.
Mm-hmm. In my opinion, one of the most amazing and emotional novels by Simenon is this one, Trois Chambres Manhattan, Tres Habitaciones en Manhattan. In this novel, Simenon takes a kind of an inner journey to his loneliness, not Simenon, but the main character, of course, towards the demons of jealousy, the detachment. In some parts of the book, I had the feeling of reading a novel by Paty Modiano, wandering in these random walks through Paris. Why do you think this novel is so special, and do you think it deserves a film adaptation?
There's already been one, by the way, by Marcel Carnet. To be honest, not a very good adaptation, but definitely deserves another one for sure. It is, well, this book may be special for different people. For me, it's very special because behind it all, in filigrane behind it, it's the story of my father meeting my mother, and a lot of what the main male character experiences in his life, my father was experiencing that as he was writing the book, because as a very rare occurrence, this is a book that was written by my father at the same time that he was living experiences that led to that were inspiring this book. Usually my father needed at least weeks, if not years and months, to sift through his memories and to put them back together in a novel construction. But here I have the manuscript of this book, and you can really see how the book was being written at the same time that things had happened the night before.
There is another question for Caroline. Is there a different reception of the novels depending if they are novels with Maigret or roman d'or without Maigret?
Well, I think, I find the roman d'or every bit as captivating as the Maigret. I think it's an easier sell, obviously, to have a detective with a series of books, and there's 75 of them. And then stories, and then all of the roman d'or are individual, and each one of them is a self-contained, extraordinary psychological, journey of humanity. Really, again, going back to that word. So, I think it's to me, the work of Simenon is one fluid piece of work where you have one bit of it is Maigret and over 300 are something completely different, and each book in itself is a voyage of discovery. And to me, you start reading the roman d'or as you read the Maigret. You just have to; they're addictive, one after the other. So, and it's obviously for publishers, it's easier to begin with the Maigret and to really get people familiar with the work of Simenon through Maigret. But then there's the joy of the roman d'or to come.
Maybe it's worth saying that roman d'or means hard novels. I don't know if that is being translated for the public. And dur, my father used that word because for him it was tough. They were tougher to write than the Maigret. Mm-hmm. And I would say that in a way they're probably a bit tougher. They need a bit more energy from the reader to experience the life of the characters and the overall arc of these characters. But the end result is just as rewarding. Just as Caroline said, I think it's like a Maigret is like a gentle hill that you will climb. You'll have a great view. In order to get that view, you take another path that is a bit steeper, and that will be the roman d'or. Mm-hmm. But the themes are the same. And they're just explored in a different way.
In that interview published by the Paris Review magazine, I think it was by Carvel Collins, he said something that he said, your father said that when he was writing, he needed to live as a monk without a telephone around, not to be disturbed while writing. Surely this was easier to do at that time than now. How do you think his attitude would be now that we live in this super connected world? How would he manage to work?
Oh, he would disconnect. He would just shut off the phone. It's very simple. It's almost simpler in a way, because here, if you don't have a phone, you don't have any connection with anything. Mm. So, you just leave the phone in the bathtub and go and write. That's just as simple as that. And I can guarantee you he would not be spending his days on Facebook, that's for sure. But he would not, and I want to emphasize that he would respect social media, because in fact his relationship with journalists throughout his life and with new media, because don't forget, mm-hmm. cinema at one point was a new medium. TV at one point was brand new, it was, and people were telling things about TV that we are saying today about social media. And he always embraced new technology and always tried to find a way to work with it. So he would probably not be manning a Facebook account himself, but he would probably try to find a way to write stories that can be read, on an iPhone. I would not be surprised if he was a young man today. That's probably something he would explore.
Talking about journalism, my feeling after reading some Magritte novels is that the detective respected a lot the work of journalists. It is very evident in Magritte Tenda Piège, Magritte tiende una trampa. He feels very bad when he has to cheat journalists, but he did it because he needs to cheat them, because he's a detective, he's a policeman. What was the relationship of your father with journalists? Even you have to remember he started working as a journalist.
Yes, I mean, he owes his career to having been a journalist first, and he knows how difficult the job is. People look at journalists from their point of view, but if you look at the world from the point of view of journalists, it's not an easy job to perform. And he respected them. He respected them very well, treated them well, and in turn, to be honest, he was very well treated by them. Now, he did complain here and there in a nice way from time to time that no matter what he would tell them, they would write the same thing, which in a way is a little true. But it didn't bother him too much.
I have plenty of questions, but I think it's up to the audience to ask questions to our guest. Who wants to start? Is there anybody? ¿Alguien quiere preguntar?
Does anybody want to ask a question?
No.
Well, I keep asking, and just in case someone wants to join us. When I was preparing this debate, I called the editorial director of Anagrama, Silvia Cessé, just to know why, the reason to come back to Simenon. She said that she believed that Simenon was a writer for writers because of his expertise when building a plot, but she also told me that he was able to create a whole atmosphere with only 2 adjectives. And I remember in that interview in the Paris Review, your father said that he received this advice by the writer Colette to avoid the use of adjectives, and he really acted in this way, avoiding adjectives. Do you think this is one of the reasons why Simenon's style is so alive today? This straight style for both of us.
Well, I have to say there's something about short books. I mean, short books are very compelling, aren't they? And certainly today, with the mediums that we have, whether it's ebooks or for translation, everybody loves short books. It's much easier and much more accessible. So I think there's something compelling about the length of the books. But you feel as if you could have read War and Peace in one of those thin books for everything that it covers. It's extraordinary. It is, and so many writers, today read them and they. How did he do it? How does he get so much into so few words?
It's one thing he actually consciously tried to build, and one thing that people don't really realize is that he consciously learned for about 10 years how to write. He said, learning how to write is something that there's no God-given gift. You have to learn. You have to learn how to play the violin. If you don't know how to put your fingers on the strings and move with the I don't know you call it in English, and you want to play an opus by Bach, or you can't. So the same thing. If I'm writing, I need to be able to write without having to think every sentence how I'm going to put that sentence together. So it's something that he perfected for about 10 years, and then on and on and on for the rest of his life. And the other thing that he was quite consciously trying to do, beyond excuse me, the question of adjectives or kind of words, he said, I need to use words that have a weight on their own, that don't need further description, that just because of what they represent, they don't need any further, elaboration as to how they look like or whatever. And I think that is one of the great aspects of reading my father. You don't go through. He punches you straight into the gut. He doesn't go through the brain first. You just go boom like that when you read him. And I think that is another great pleasure. That is why, probably, as you say, is you get that incredibly emotional relationship with his writings.
I read a critic saying that another of the reasons for Maigret's contemporaneity is that he's a character who emphasizes with the victim of the plots, and also a character who doesn't pretend to be an example for the others. Do you agree with this?
Yeah, I mean, your question, there's a two-sided question. I mean, that Maigret empathizes, well, with victims, but not only the victims. Sometimes the perpetrators themselves, he will try to understand them. A great... yes, absolutely. Well, it's... Here in La Mort de Belle, you never know.
La Morte de Belle.
Yeah. It goes even further. Here is trying to find out whether he is, and we also try to find out when we read this book whether the main character actually is the culprit or not. It's very interesting. I don't know if I have time to give you a little story about this.
Yes, please.
Okay. It was adapted not too long ago for French television. And I was very close to the actor who played the main character. Bruno Solo is his name. And he explained to me that it was a very special thing that happened on this shoot. As you probably know, when you shoot a movie, you never shoot the scenes, in the same sequence as they're going to be shown on in the final product. But in this particular case, the director decided to shoot the whole movie from beginning to end in the right order. And the main character told me, it's absolutely amazing because until the last day, I shot that film absolutely convinced that I was innocent. And the last day I discovered that I was guilty. So that gives you a little bit the example of what, in fact, my father tries to achieve here. Nothing is black and white. We can all be, well, he said it like that. We can all be fine. One day in the right circumstances, unfortunately, we can become assassins, but we can also become angels.
It's also a good example of writing about the problems of being inside a community, being a part of the community, the pros and cons of being a part of a community. It was about gossip at that time. Now it's about social media, but it's the same situation.
Yes, I think what people live today is even worse, because at least in the community you knew which community you were in that time. And this was a very American novel, by the way, because that type of community is really New England, close community. And even if you didn't know where the rumor came from, you know it had to come from one of the people around you were meeting and you were dealing with. Now I would not want to be 15 or 16 today and have to deal with the incredible pressure that social media put on people, on individuals, especially young girls. But young men do feel pressure as well, unfortunately. A different kind of pressure.
Let's give another try. Someone? ¿Alguien quiere preguntar? ¿Alguna pregunta?
Does anybody have a question? Come on, don't be shy. Yes, we have a question there.
Perdona. Micro. ¿Dónde? ¿Ah? Bien. Buenas tardes. Estoy muy emocionada porque desde que tenía 15 años leo a Simenon. Desde el principio, desde el primer libro que leí, vi que era un autor extraordinario. No era solo una novela de misterio. No, él ahondaba en la psicología del...
He went further. I have been reading Simenon since I was 15. He showed you the historical situation. I then learnt French. I haven't talked French for a long time, but I learnt French and I read him in French and in Spanish too. What I wanted to say is it is much more difficult to write in a concise manner saying so many things with very few words, and I greatly admire him for that, and I admire his humor, of course. I've read his other works, his autobiographies. He talks about his family, his mother, when his mother dies, and in all these works it is the same author. To me, he is very human. With journalist style on one hand, but I haven't really asked a question. I just wanted to share you my experience with Georges Simenon.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Very touching.
¿Alguna pregunta más?
Any further question? Yeah. Do you think it would be possible, or would it be a misrespect? I mean, I've watched the trailer. Would it be possible to put that on the metaverse so that we could try to chase young people so that they could feel more attached to these kind of novels? So, have you thought about that possibility, or maybe it would be a misrespect to try to find these novels in metaverse?
Look, well, number one is there is no disrespect whatsoever. As I said earlier, my father today, if he was 30, would definitely be thinking about the metaverse. The question is how do we today get involved with the metaverse? People who talk about the metaverse, who are creating the metaverse, they're not yet completely they don't really understand themselves sometimes what they're actually doing. So, you know, it's something that will eventually happen, I'm convinced. But how is going to take a little time. But, you know, it's just a question of time. Just like NFTs. You know, these are you know, it's it takes a little while to see how these technologies can be used in different ways. I'm not convinced that you know, we could actually put some manuscripts on, create NFTs of manuscripts and things like that. Why not? But it has to be part of, what's most important on the books first. No, special editions.
Yeah.
Well, could be.
I think the other thing I love about is how sensual he is, and two of my favorite books. One of the Maigres is Nights at the Crossroad, where he in the book he absolutely, you feel he falls in love with one of the most evil of women, and she is so sensually described. You can understand why he feels in love. You think, oh my God, he is a man. And the other of the Roman deux is Le Mans, where you have a man who is madly in love with another woman. The two couples they've gone away for the weekend, and there's a snowstorm, and he ends up. They end up sleeping on the floor by a fire, and he has his wife on one side, and the other side is the woman he desires more than anything, and their hands never touch, but he can feel the heat of her hand. He cannot sleep for the desire to touch her, but he can't. And we all know that feeling when the electricity from somebody you're crazy about, but it's secret. And I've never had anybody describe that passion so well as he does. And you find those moments that are just unforgettable all the way through the books.
It's so true. I thank you for bringing it up, because I could not really do that. But it's very, very true. And in fact, because I mentioned Pierre Renoir as one of my favorite Maigres, and in fact he played in the very first adaptation of a Maigret story, and it was precisely Night at the Crossroad, and it is the one, and that was the very first adaptation by Jean Renoir, and this is where probably the only place where a Maigret managed to express that sensuality with the actress when he interrogates her. I fought very hard with Rowan Atkinson to try to get something similar, but
didn't work. Did it?
Didn't work.
No, it didn't work.
No.
But God, it's in the book.
But book, yes.
John,
John, now it seems that it is trendy to talk about immersive exhibitions, interactive exhibitions, and just a couple of minutes ago we were talking about the concept of metaverse. Maybe you might be able to consider in the near future the possibility of organizing some kind of exhibition on your father, an immersive, interactive exhibition such as the one that we have here in Madrid on Clint. How about that?
Between 2006 and 2012, I tried to interest the city of Liège into a special Simenon center where we would precisely offer that to the public. I gave up after many years of difficulties in communication. But I never gave up, and right now I'm working with the University of Liège on a new tack where we're going to have not an immersive experience next year, but what we see as a first stage in creating a Simenon environment in Liège. And that will be a Simenon festival, which will have many different aspects. It will be a 3-day event with meetings, with screenings, with authors coming to talk about their experience with Simenon, etc. And if that is successful, maybe we can go the next step is start building a Simenon Institute, which was precisely try to create what you're talking about. As a first step, for example, just to be ready, we are recreating my father's voice so that we can, from those files, make sure that we create new, where he can himself introduce the various places of Liège during a visit, for example. these are all building blocks going towards that kind of experience. But that takes time. It's we had to, just to give you an example, it took us 5 months to sift through all the various interviews to find what was the right voice to choose from, in order to recreate that artificial voice. In the future, what we'll do, we'll just type the words and he'll read them.
Si hay alguna pregunta más.
If there's any further questions, you have the floor. If not, we will close the event. Okay then. So thank you very much for coming along. Thank you, John. Thank you, Caroline, for your words. And if we want to keep enjoying the Maghreb week, we have some other things to do. First of all, we have to read the books. After that, we have to watch the movie. And third, we have to go, everybody, to Segovia to enjoy their statements, their words, and everything that we have around Simenon's figure in Segovia. So please have a great festival, and thank you very much for everything.